You mentioned there, Ms. O'Shea, that some of the comments that have been made are a breach of promise to the electorate. I wonder if, is it almost verging on a breach of the legislation itself? Because if you look at, Section 7, which says that the Minister shall not later than 3 years after the commencement of this section carry out a review of the operation of this Act. I mean, the natural corollary to that is that you act following that review, and we're now 5 years down the road. So, do you think, from a from a legal point of view, that if we go much beyond this, we're actually into the territory of breaching the Act itself?
I absolutely agree with you, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. There is a narrative out there that people voted for the heads of bill. And just from, again, you're here as a legal expert, just from your own point of view, is that correct that people voted for this bill?
Well, they voted to change the Constitution to allow the Oireachtas to legislate for termination of pregnancy.
Exactly.
Yes.
To legislate for termination of pregnancy, and what you've looked into it. And is it fair to say that the legislation itself is actually preventing women in some instances from accessing terminations, and therefore it's again a breach of promise to the electorate?
I think so, yes.
Who voted for terminations. And again, just to go back to the point, when we look at the exit poll, 75% of people said that they voted not based on the heads of bill, not based on any of the conversations at committee. Much as I would like to think that the thousands of doors I knocked on, that was persuasive, actually 75% of people said they had made up their mind at a very early stage. So we now have this obligation on us to carry out the recommendations, I think, that you've made. But is it also fair to say that we can go beyond your recommendations?
Absolutely. I mean, you are the Oireachtas, and it's a democratic mandate that you have. Yes.
And so and sorry, I'm being so brief just because of my time, just in relation to that point around decriminalisation, I suppose, is it fair from both of your point of view to say that in speaking to women or in speaking to practitioners that there is a chilling effect on doctors?
There is, definitely.
From criminalisation.
That was the theme that came through consistently. So
you're not saying that we shouldn't change the law to
I think you really need to change the law. It's dissuading people from getting involved, and it's encouraging the practice of defensive medicine, just purely because of the want to avoid
of the criminalisation part. And the World Health Organization is pretty firm on this point.
Exactly, and that's very much evidence-based if you see how many reviews they carried out.
So do you think that this Oireachtas committee, which I'm not a member of ordinarily, should investigate the recommendations and the guidelines from the World Health Organization?
I think that they're recent. They are evidence-based. If you look at the amount of research that went into those guidelines, it's a phenomenal amount of research done on an international scale, and I don't think you're actually going to get much better.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you said, the scope of what you've been able to do is somewhat limited. Well,
I wanted to be faithful to the terms of reference, and that was to review the operation of this Act, and that is what I did.
Yeah, and just with my final minute, we have, and I'm from the west of Ireland, we do have a challenge in relation to recruitment anyway, ordinarily, for medical practitioners, and so is this limiting us even further in rural Ireland from getting medical professionals?
I think it is. I think the lead-in time to appointment of a consultant is 1 year. So that of itself is a delaying factor. Then a person may take up the post. There could be a further delay if they have a contractual obligation somewhere else. There may be certain hospitals, and I know the bigger, more technical hospitals that attract more attention than the smaller ones. So it could be the case that further incentives to try and attract willing providers to those hospitals need to be included, such as protected time. But I mean, what is notable to me, at the time of doing this review, there were 8 hospitals that didn't provide. And I asked the HSE as to what is the status of recruitment, and they came back, which indicated that an additional 4 would be providing this year, but that the recruitment process hadn't actually started until last year. If you infer from the fact that they were interviewing in January, it must have meant that they didn't start the process until 2022. So what has been happening in the interim period is another question.
Yeah.
And if you do have management, and it would seem to be from the research that Dr. Duffy did in certain hospitals that are quite apathetic towards service provision, then I think that needs to be teased out. And where you have service arrangements in place that allow the HSE in Section 37 hospitals to almost come in and take over the board if they exceed their expenditure, why can they not come in to these hospitals and take over the recruitment process?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Just on the